Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of Fintech News. Today is July 23rd, and I'm your host, Nicholas Belvo. Today, we have the pleasure of having our program's lead, Sophie, join us.
Hello.
As well as head of research, Cigar. So today, we have three topics that we wanted to bring to your attention. Number one, N26, that raises another $170 million after already raising $300 million in their Series D, which now brings them to a valuation of $3.5 billion. So we'll dive into what they do and what does this mean. Next, we'll be talking about DFI, which announces Canada's top 50 fintechs for 2019. So running through with Sophie, some of those companies, and what the trends overall look like. And lastly, we'll be talking about an Insurtech called Cuvva, which in the last 2 years just sold over 1 million policies. So they experienced 750% growth over the last 2 years, which is quite incredible for the Insurtech industry as a whole. So let's start off and dive right in with N26. You want to tell us a bit about what they do, Cigar, please?
So they're what we call challenger bank, and they started out as a service provider for really high net worth individuals, and they have this really cool metal MasterCard that is useful in case you want to spend a lot of money. And recently they went into the mainstream market and started servicing people such as you and I, but if we were in Europe, and with their division called N26U. So just like any other fintech, they're 10xing the financial services experience and providing consumers with insights on how they're spending money, how they can save better, etc., etc. And they're challenging or are providing a lot of tough competition to the traditional banking industry that does not do all of that. So really impressive. It's one of the co-founders of this startup was Peter Thiel, the co-founder of PayPal as well.
Right.
So that kind of gives a lot of credibility, and it shows that it'll be really promising in the future. With this valuation, with this fundraising round, they're valued at 3.5 billion. One of the biggest startups in Germany.
Yeah,
at this point
biggest
in time.
German startup as a whole, but then also one of the highest valued fintechs globally.
Globally, right? Yeah, and 3.5 billion is a lot when it comes to fintech, given that it's a relatively new industry. I just saw a news piece that Robinhood, and we were discussing about that,
Yep.
is valued at 7.6 billion now. Other startups like Ant Financial are also in the billion-dollar valuation. So they're not too many, and reaching that stage of crossing $1 billion.
Getting to the unicorn level, but
Yeah.
then tripling that.
It's a
A
really
feat.
big feat. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, very cool. So it's going to be interesting to explore that. And one thing that, we were talking about before that could be another interesting piece is to explore maybe the top 5 or top 10 biggest fintechs around the world,
Right.
and see if that's something interesting to you.
Mhm, for sure.
And for you guys as well. I thought that could be something interesting to see, because N26 is now one of the biggest in the world, but to see how the others compare. But just very quickly,
Right.
this being like a new age bank, what would the other biggest fintechs in the world look like right now?
So Ant Financial, like I mentioned, out of China, and they're in payments, they're in insurance. It's a spin-off. It's not a spin-off. It's from it's co-founded by the same person, Jack Ma, from Alibaba. So they're the biggest, let's say, not the fintech but corporation
Right.
in China, and they
Tech fins, right?
Tech fins, yeah. Well, they started as a fintech, and now they are just a really huge corporation. Robinhood is also an example. SoFi, which is in student lending in the US, is another
Okay.
example when it comes to big fintechs or unicorn status fintechs. Wealthsimple from Canada is still not unicorn status, but it's getting there. I think the last time that I checked, the valuation was around 750 million.
Okay.
Plaid, they entered the Canadian market recently. I think they went to 3 billion revenues, or it was 3 billion revenues in. No, I think it was valuation. I'm not so sure. I'll let you know in the next.
So we'll
podcast.
dive in deeper in another segment just about the top
Yeah.
biggest fintech companies in the world. But speaking about Canadian unicorns, shameless plug for our first edition of Fintech Drinks. So that's coming up August 21st, of which Sophie's organizing. We're all organized as a whole. But if you're interested, we're having a conversation with Flinks, which is a startup based in Montreal. That's going to be a lot of fun, so do check that out. Moving on to the next topic now is DFI, which announces Canada's top 50 fintech companies for 2019. So Sophie, I know used a couple of them. Could you run us through some that you spotted on the list that you use in like every day or once in a while?
Sure. So I'm here less in a capacity of an expert, as a actual consumer. So one of the highlighted Canadian fintechs that really I use a lot and has actually helped me to get my spending under control is Koho. I'm notoriously bad with credit cards. I'm sure some of you can relate, but Koho has really helped me to temper my spending and stop relying so much on credit cards. So what it is basically a prepaid Visa, but what sets it apart from other prepaid Visas is that you get 0.5% back, cash back on all of your purchases, as well as a kind of like a squirreling away savings plan. So for every dollar you spend, you can round up and it goes into a savings. And so for me, that really works well in terms of tempering my credit card spending. And then another thing that I use, which is kind of funny because it hits both of them, is Wealthsimple Trade. So Wealthsimple has an app that you can actually buy individual stocks yourself. This is not recommended that people do this, but it's still kind of a little bit fun.
You have to have some fun in life. If it's all automated, you can't do anything.
Finance people do not recommend you buy individual stocks, but I use Wealthsimple Trade to buy Lightspeed stocks, which is also one of the top 50 Canadian fintechs, and that stock has been doing pretty well. My portfolio is not at all diversified, but that's a fun kind of way that I'm playing with real money and engaging with Canadian fintechs. So.
Well, it's great, and you have to start somewhere, right? And I think fintech is a great way to introduce people in general, especially millennials, into investing, into saving, into financial education as a whole. Cigar, for you, when you look at the list of the 50, are there any trends you spot specifically, and like, are there any insights you could pull out from looking at those 50 companies?
A quick look, it's sort of a mixed bag. For instance, from Montreal alone, there's a payments company, there's a data company, and Milo and Payment Rail. So it's sort of a mixed bag, and I'm seeing fintechs that started, let's say, 6-7 years ago, and fintechs that started 1 or 2 years ago.
And there's definitely a big range as well, right, in terms of valuation. We have smaller startups, and then we have Beast, Wealthsimple, Lightspeed, Shopify figuring on that list as well.
Exactly right. And if I were to say that one pattern that I can observe, there's more focus on B2C startups, which is kind of counterintuitive. So there's always this saying that B2C, if you do well, you can do really well, but right, B2B is less of a risky venture. So maybe that's the reason that we see so many B2C fintech startups here, because they catch attention more. Everyone uses these fintech startups and their products, so it's more talked about, and they make the list easier as compared to B2B fintech startups.
Okay, very cool. Well, congratulations to all the 50, especially those from Montreal, Quebec, but across Canada, and we hope to see some more of our startups as well going through our programs, figuring on that list maybe next year or in the years to come. The last topic we wanted to dive into was Cuvva. So an Insurtech, which sold over 1 million policies in the last 2 years, and they are run us through what Cuvva does exactly.
So it's a really interesting Insurtech idea. So let's assume that you want to let's say you want to use Car2Go, okay? Yeah. And you're scared about getting into an accident, and let's assume that you get into an accident, and who pays for the insurance? Right? Who pays for the damage? Is it the car company? Is it you? You're the driver. And Cuvva saw this gap, and they decided to provide insurance on an hourly basis or on a tariff basis. Okay. And it's the demand. I mean, the revenues speak for themselves. The demand was so high that they accomplished a 750% growth.
It's amazing.
1 million policies. I believe that we spoke about a similar insurance company
with the scooters. It was Dot partnering with, I could go back in my notes, but yeah, so all this, the new way of, we're going away from ownership and going more towards a leasing model where an organization, corporation owns physical goods and people just have access to it on a time basis. Right. So Insurtech comes really relevant then, right, to then see how those assets are being managed and insured.
Exactly right. The ownership of the assets is changing, but there's temporary ownership. And
Right.
for that, you need insurance somehow. And this is why new business models in insurance are springing up and
Springing up quick, really quick.
Yeah, we didn't discuss this today, but there was a report from Juniper about 2 or 3 days ago that states that Insurtech companies in North America and Europe will spend close to 600 million on process automation because they're feeling threatened by all these
Right.
Insurtech companies. So.
And this then leads to also more KYC companies to be able to figure out who the person insuring is, be able to automate that whole process. Cuvva, what's fascinating, it's all mobile based.
Right.
That's how they were able to really have that scale. But it's just, I think it's a domain that we're just going to keep covering and seeing week over week. This is mostly coming out of Europe, but I think in Latin America and throughout the world as well.
Yeah, it's going to be big in demand all over the world.
Very cool. Great. Well, that wraps up everything for us here today at the FinTech News HQ. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Sagar. And we'll see you all next week at 3:30 p.m. on Tuesday for next FinTech News. Hey, everyone.